The history of Myanmar covers the period from the time of first known human settlements 13,000 years ago to the present day. The earliest inhabitants of recorded history were Tibeto-Burman-speaking people who established the Pyay city-states ranged as far south as Pyay, and adopted Theravada Buddhism. Another group, the Bamar people, entered the upper Irrawaddy valley in the early 9th century. They went on to establish the Bagan Kingdom, the first ever unification of the Irrawaddy Valley and its periphery. The Burmese language and Bamar culture slowly came to replace Pyu norms during this period. After the first Mongol invasion of Burma in 1287, several small kingdoms, of which the Kingdom of Ava, the Irrawaddy Kingdom, the Kingdom of Marauku and the Shan States were principal powers, came to dominate the landscape, replete with ever-shifting alliances and constant wars. In the second half of the 16th century, the Targu Dynasty reunified the country, and founded the largest empire in the history of Southeast Asia for a brief period. Later Targu kings instituted several key administrative and economic reforms that gave rise to a smaller, more peaceful and prosperous kingdom in the 17th and early 18th centuries. In the second half of the 18th century, the Conform dynasty restored the kingdom, and continued the Targu reforms that increased central rule in peripheral regions and produced one of the most literate states in Asia. The dynasty also went to war with all its neighbors. The Anglo-Burmese Wars eventually led to British colonial rule. British rule brought several enduring social, economic, cultural and administrative changes that completely transformed the once agrarian society. Most importantly, the British rule highlighted outgroup differences among the country's myriad ethnic groups. Since independence in 1948, the country has been in one of the longest-running civil wars that remains unresolved. The country was under military rule under various guises from 1962 to 2010, and in the process has become one of the least developed nations in the world. Early history. Prehistory. The earliest archaeological evidence suggests that cultures existed in Burma as early as 11,000 BCE. Most indications of early settlement have been found in the central dry zone, where scattered sites appear in close proximity to the Irrawaddy River. The Neolithic Burma Stone Age existed at a time thought to parallel the Lower and Middle Paleolithic in Europe. The Neolithic and New Stone Age, when plants and animals were first domesticated and polished stone tools appeared, is evidenced in Burma by 3 caves located near Taongi at the edge of the Shan Plateau that dated to 10,000 to 6,000 BC. About 1500 BCE, people in the region were turning copper into bronze, growing rice, and domesticating chickens and pigs. They were among the first people in the world to do so. By 500 BCE, iron-working settlements emerged in an area south of present-day Mandalay. Bronze-decorated coffins and burial sites filled with earthenware remains have been excavated. Archaeological evidence at Samon Valley south of Mandalay suggests rice-growing settlements that traded with China between 500 BC and 200 CE. During the Iron Age, archaeological evidence also out of Samon Valley revealed changes in infant burial practices that were greatly influenced by India. These changes include burying infants in jars in which the size depict the family status. Pyu city-states. The Pyu entered the Irrawaddy Valley from present-day Yunnan c. 2nd century BCE, and went on to found city-states throughout the Irrawaddy Valley. The original home of the Pyu is reconstructed to be Qinghai Lake in present-day Qinghai and Gansu. The Pyu were the earliest inhabitants of Burma of whom records are extant. During this period, Burma was part of an overland trade route from China to India. trade with India brought Buddhism from South India. By the 4th century, many in the Irrawaddy Valley had converted to Buddhism. Of the many city-states, the largest and most important was the Sri Kshetra kingdom southeast of modern Pyay, also thought to once be the capital city. In March 638, the Pyu of Sri Kshetra launched a new calendar that later became the Burmese calendar. 8th century Chinese records identify 18 Pyu states throughout the Irrawaddy Valley, and describe the Pyu as a humane and peaceful people to whom war was virtually unknown and who wore silk cotton instead of actually silk so that they would not have to kill silkworms. The Chinese records also report that the Pyu knew how to make astronomical calculations, and that many Pyu boys entered the monastic life at 7 to the age of 20. It was a long-lasting civilization that lasted nearly a millennium to the early 9th century until a new group of swift horsemen from the north, the Bamars, entered the upper Irrawaddy Valley. In the early 9th century, the Pyu city-states of Upper Burma came under constant attacks by Nangzhao. In 832, the Nangzhao sacked Hailingyi, which had overtaken Prome as the chief Pyu city-state and informal capital. Archaeologists interpret early Chinese texts detailing the plundering of Hailingyi in 832 to detail the capturing of 3,000 Pyu prisoners, later becoming Nangzhao slaves at Kunming, while Pyu settlements remained in Upper Burma until the advent of the Pagan Empire in the mid-11th century. The Pyu gradually were absorbed into the expanding Burman Kingdom of Pagan in the next 4 centuries. The Pyu language still existed until the late 12th century. By the 13th century, the Pyu had assumed Bamar ethnicity. The histories, legends of the Pyu were also incorporated to those of the Bamars. Mon kingdoms according to the colonial-era scholarship, as early as the 6th century. Another people called the Mon began to enter the present-day Lower Burma from the Mon kingdoms of Haravuncha and Varavati in modern-day Thailand. By the mid-9th century, the Mon had founded at least 2 small kingdoms centered around Bago and Atin. The earliest external reference to a Mon kingdom in Lower Burma was in 844 to 848 by Arab geographers, but recent research shows that there is no evidence to support colonial period conjectures that a Mon-speaking polity existed in Lower Burma until the late 13th century, and the first recorded claim that a kingdom of Atin existed came only in 1479. Pagan dynasty. Early pagan. The Burmans who had come down with the early 9th Nangzhao raids of the Pyu states remained in Upper Burma. In the mid to late 9th century, Pagan was founded as a fortified settlement along a strategic location on the Irrawaddy near the confluence of the Irrawaddy and its main tributary, the Chindwin River. It may have been designed to help the Nangzhao pacify the surrounding countryside. Over the next 200 years, the small principality gradually grew to include its immediate surrounding areas to about 200 miles north to south and 80 miles from east to west. By Anurata's accession in 1044, Pagan Empire. Over the next 30 years, Anurata founded the Pagan Kingdom, unifying for the first time the regions that would later constitute the modern-day Burma. Anurata's successes by the late 12th century had extended their influence farther south into the Upper Malay Peninsula, at least to the Salween River in the east, below the current China border in the farther north, and to the west, northern Arakan and the Chin Hills. The Burmese chronicles claim pagan suzerainty over the entire Chao Phraya Valley. and the Thai chronicles include the Lower Malay Peninsula down to the Strait of Malacca Pagan's realm. By the early 12th century, Pagan had emerged as a major power alongside the Khmer Empire in Southeast Asia, recognized by Song China and the Chola dynasty of India. Well into the mid-13th century, most of mainland Southeast Asia was under some degree of control of either the Pagan Empire or the Khmer Empire. Anarata also implemented a series of key social, religious and economic reforms that would have a lasting impact in Burmese history. His social and religious reforms later developed into the modern-day culture of Burma. The most important development was the introduction of Theravada Buddhism to Upper Burma after Pagan's conquest of the Bagan Kingdom in 1057. Supported by royal patronage, the Buddhist school gradually spread to the village level in the next 3 centuries, although Vajrayana Buddhist, Mahayana Hindu, and animism remained heavily entrenched at all social strata. Pagan's economy was primarily based on the Kyork's agricultural basin northeast of the capital, and Minbu, south of Bagan, where the Bamars had built a large number of new weirs and diversionary canals. It also benefited from external trade through its coastal ports. The wealth of the kingdom was devoted to building over 10,000 Buddhist temples in the pagan capital zone between 11th and 13th centuries. The wealthy donated tax-free land to religious authorities. The Burmese language and culture gradually became dominant in the upper Irrawaddy Valley, eclipsing the Pyu and Pali norms by the late 12th century. By then, the Bamar leadership of the kingdom was unquestioned. The Pyu had largely assumed the Bamar ethnicity in Upper Burma. The Burmese language, once an alien tongue, was now the lingua franca of the kingdom. The kingdom went into decline in the 13th century as the continuous growth of tax-free religious wealth. By the 1280s, 2/3 of Upper Burma's cultivable land had been alienated to the religion, affected the crown's ability to retain the loyalty of courtiers and military servicemen. This ushered in a vicious circle of internal disorders and external challenges by Mons, Mongols and Shans. Beginning in the early 13th century, the Shan began to encircle the Pagan Empire from the north and the east. The Mongols, who had conquered Yunnan, the former homeland of the Bamar, in 1253, began their invasion in 1277, and in 1287 sacked Pagan, ending the Pagan Kingdom's 250-year rule of the Irrawaddy Valley and its periphery. Pagan's rule of central Burma came to an end 10 years later in 1297 when it was toppled by the Maya Kingdom. Small kingdoms. After the fall of Pagan, the Mongols left the searing Irrawaddy Valley, but the Pagan kingdom was irreparably broken up into several small kingdoms. By the mid-14th century, the country had become organized along 4 major power centers: Upper Burma, Lower Burma, Shan States and Arakan. Many of the power centers were themselves made up of minor kingdoms or princely states. This era was marked by a series of wars and switching alliances. Smaller kingdoms played a precarious game of paying allegiance to more powerful states, sometimes simultaneously. Ava, founded in 1364, Kingdom of Ava was the successor state to earlier, even smaller kingdoms based in central Burma: Targu, Mayashing, Pinya Kingdom, and Zagaring Kingdom. In its first years of existence, Ava, which viewed itself as the rightful successor to the Pagan Kingdom, tried to reassemble the former empire. While it was able to pull the Targu-ruled kingdom and peripheral Shan states into its fold at the peak of its power, it failed to reconquer the rest. The 40 Years' War with Irrawaddy left Ava exhausted, and its power plateaued. Its kings regularly faced rebellions in its vassal regions but were able to put them down until the 1480s. In the late 15th century, the Pagan Kingdom and its Shan States successfully broke away, and in the early 16th century, Ava itself came under attacks from its former vassals. In 1510, Targu also broke away. In 1527, the Confederation of Shan States led by Mon Yin captured Ava. The Confederation's rule of Upper Burma, though lasted until 1555, was marred by internal fighting between Mon Yin and Tibeto houses. The kingdom was toppled by Targu forces in 1555. The Burmese language and culture came into its own during the Ava period. Pagan-Empire-speaking kingdom was founded as Ramanadesa right after Pagan's collapse in 1287. In the beginning, the Lower Burma-based kingdom was a loose federation of regional power centers in Motama, Bago and the Irrawaddy Delta. The energetic reign of Razadrit cemented the kingdom's existence. Razadrit firmly unified the three Mon-speaking regions together, and successfully held off Ava in the 40 Years' War. After the war, Irrawaddy entered its golden age, whereas its rival Ava gradually went into decline. For the 1420s to the 1530s, Irrawaddy was the most powerful and prosperous kingdom of all post-pagan kingdoms. Under a string of especially gifted monarchs, the kingdom enjoyed a long golden age, profiting from foreign commerce. The kingdom, with a flourishing Mon language and culture, became a center of commerce and Theravada Buddhism. Due to the inexperience of its last ruler, the powerful kingdom was conquered by the upstart Targu dynasty in 1539. The kingdom was briefly revived between 1550 and 1552. It effectively controlled only Pegu and was crushed by Bamar in 1552. Shan States. The Shans, ethnic Thai peoples who came down with the Mongols, stayed and quickly came to dominate much of northern to eastern arc of Burma, from northwestern Sagaring Division to Kachin Hills to the present-day Shan Hills. The most powerful Shan states were Mon Yin and Mograng in present-day Kachin State, followed by Hscnwi, Tipor and Momek in present-day northern Shan State. Minor states included Kali, Bamo, County Long, Hopong, Hsatung, Samung Kam, Sonsup, Shikip, Shumsai, Kesi Mongam, Ken Cheng, Kenkam, Kenglon, Kengtong, Kengtung, Kokang, Kyorku Hsi Want Kyong, Laka, Loksok, Loii, Loyalong, Loimor, Nyong Shui and many more. Mon Yin, in particular, constantly raided Ava's territory in the early 16th century. The Mon Hian-led Confederation of Shan States, in alliance with Pagan Kingdom, captured Ava itself in 1527. The Confederation defeated its erstwhile ally Pagan in 1532, and ruled all of Upper Burma except Targu, but the Confederation was marred by internal bickering, and could not stop Targu, which conquered Ava in 1555 and all of the Shan states by 1563. Arakan. Although Arakan had been de facto independent since the late pagan period, the Longkya dynasty of Arakan was ineffectual, until the founding of the Merauke Kingdom in 1429. Arakan was often caught between bigger neighbors, and found itself a battlefield during the 40 Years' War between Ava and Pegu. Merauke went on to be a powerful kingdom in its own right between 15th and 17th centuries, including East Bengal between 1459 and 1666. Arakan was the only post-pagan kingdom not to be annexed by the Targu dynasty. Targu dynasty. First Targu Empire. Beginning in the 1480s, Ava faced constant internal rebellions and external attacks from the Shan states, and began to disintegrate. In 1510, Targu, located in the remote southeastern corner of the Ava Kingdom, also declared independence. When the Confederation of Shan States conquered Ava in 1527, many refugees fled southeast to Targu, the only kingdom in peace, and one surrounded by larger hostile kingdoms. Targu, led by its ambitious king Tabashwati and his deputy general Bayan, would go on to reunify the petty kingdoms that had existed since the fall of the Pagan Empire, and found the largest empire in the history of Southeast Asia. First, the upstart kingdom defeated a more powerful Irrawaddy in the Targu-Irrawaddy War. Tabashwati moved the capital to newly captured Bagan in 1539. Targu had expanded its authority up to Pagan by 1544 but failed to conquer Arakan in 1545–47 and Thailand in 1547–49. Tabashwati's successor, Bayan, continued the policy of expansion, conquering Ava in 1555 nearer Siai's Salween Shan States, land now Manipur, farther Trans-Salween Shan States, the Siam, and Lanzang, and bringing much of western and central mainland Southeast Asia under his rule. Bayan put in place a lasting administrative system that reduced the power of hereditary Shan chiefs, and brought Shan customs in line with lowland norms. But he could not replicate an effective administrative system everywhere in his far-flung empire. His empire was a loose collection of former sovereign kingdoms, whose kings were loyal to him as the Kakavati, not the kingdom of Targu. The overextended empire unraveled soon after Bayan's death in 1581. Siam broke away in 1584 and went to war with Burma until 1605. By 1597, the kingdom had lost all its possessions, including Targu, the ancestral home of the dynasty. In 1599, the Arakanese forces, aided by Portuguese mercenaries, and in alliance with the rebellious Targu forces, sacked Pegu. The country fell into chaos, with each region claiming a king. Portuguese mercenary Felipe de Brito e Nicket promptly rebelled against his Arakanese masters, and established Goa-backed Portuguese rule at Thanlin in 1603, restored Targu Kingdom, while the interregnum that followed the fall of Pagan Empire lasted over 250 years. But following the fall of First Targu was relatively short-lived. One of Bayan's sons, Nyongyin Min, immediately began the reunification effort, successfully restoring central authority over Upper Burma and nearer Shan States by 1606. His successor Nauk Petlan defeated the Portuguese at Thanlin in 1613. He recovered the upper Tanamneri coast to Davian land from the Thai by 1614. He also captured the Trans-Salween Shan States in 1622–26. His brother Thalan rebuilt the war-torn country. He ordered the first-ever census in Burmese history in 1635, which showed that the kingdom about 2 million people. By 1650, the three able kings Nyongyin, Nauk Petlan and Thalan had successfully rebuilt a smaller but far more manageable kingdom. More importantly, the new dynasty proceeded to create a legal and political system whose basic features would continue under the Conform dynasty well into the 19th century. The crown completely replaced the hereditary chieftainships with appointed governorships in the entire Irrawaddy Valley, and greatly reduced the hereditary rights of Shan chiefs. It also reined in the continuous growth of monastic wealth and autonomy, giving a greater tax base. Its trade and secular administrative reforms built a prosperous economy for more than 80 years, except for a few occasional rebellions and and an external war. Burma defeated Thailand's attempt to take Lan Na and Motama in 1662–64. The kingdom was largely at peace for the rest of the 17th century. The kingdom entered a gradual decline, and the authority of the palace kings deteriorated rapidly in the 1720s. From 1724 onwards, the Meitei people began raiding the upper Chindwin River. In 1727, southern Lan Na successfully revolted, leaving just northern Lan Na under an increasingly nominal Burmese rule. Meitei raids intensified in the 1730s, reaching increasingly deeper parts of central Burma. In 1740, the Mon in Lower Burma began a rebellion and founded the restored Irrawaddy Kingdom, and by 1745 controlled much of Lower Burma. The Siamese also moved their authority up the Tanameri coast. By 1752, Irrawaddy invaded Upper Burma in November 1751, and captured Ava on 23 March 1752, ending the 266-year-old Targu dynasty. Conform dynasty. Reunification. Soon after the fall of Ava, a new dynasty rose in Shwebo to challenge the authority of Irrawaddy. Over the next 70 years, the highly militaristic Conform dynasty went on to create the largest Burmese empire, second only to the empire of Bayan. By 1759, King Alongpaya's Conform forces had reunited all of Burma, extinguished the Mon-led Irrawaddy dynasty once and for all, and driven out the European powers who provided arms to Irrawaddy, the French from Thanlin and the English from Cape Negrais. Wars with Siam and China. The kingdom then went to war with the Neolithic kingdom, which had occupied up the Tanameri coast to Motama during the Burmese Civil War, and had provided shelter to the Mon refugees. By 1767, the Conform armies had subdued much of Laos and defeated the Thai, but they could not finish off the remaining Siamese resistance, as they were forced to defend against 4 invasions by King China. While the Burmese defences held in the most disastrous frontier war the King dynasty had ever waged, the Burmese were preoccupied with another impending invasion by the world's largest empire for years. The king kept a heavy military line-up in the border areas for about 1 decade in an attempt to wage another war while imposing a ban on inter-border trade for 2 decades. The Reunification kingdom used the Conform preoccupation with the king to recover the lost territories by 1770, and, in addition, went on to capture much of Lan Na by 1776, ending over 2 centuries of Burmese suzerainty over the region. They went to war again in 1785 to 1786, 1787, 1792, 1803 to 1808, 1809 to 1812, and 1849 to 1855, but these all resulted in a stalemate. After decades of war, the two countries essentially exchanged Tanameri and Lan Na. Westward expansion and wars with British Empire. Faced with a powerful China in the northeast and a resurgent Siam in the southeast, King Bodawpaya turned westward for expansion. He conquered Arakan in 1785, annexed Manipur in 1814, and captured Assam in 1817 to 1819, leading to a long ill-defined border with British India. Bodawpaya's successor King Bagayador was left to put down British-instigated rebellions in Manipur in 1819 and Assam in 1821 to 1822. Cross-border raids by rebels from the British-protected territories and counter-cross-border raids by the Burmese led to the First Anglo-Burmese War, lasting 2 years and costing £13 million. The First Anglo-Burmese War was the longest and most expensive war in British Indian history, but ended in a decisive British victory. Burma ceded all of Bodor-Pyay's western acquisitions plus Denasserim. Burma was crushed for years by repaying a large indemnity of £1 million. In 1852, the British unilaterally and easily seized the Targu province in the Second Anglo-Burmese War. After the war, King Mindon tried to modernize the Burmese state and economy, and made trade and territorial concessions to stave off further British encroachments, including ceding the Karenni states to the British in 1875. Nonetheless, the British, alarmed by the consolidation of French Indochina, annexed the remainder of the country in the Third Anglo-Burmese War in 1885, and sent the last Burmese king Tibeto and his family to exile in India. Administrative and economic reforms. Conform kings extended administrative reforms first began in the restored Targu dynasty period, and achieved unprecedented levels of internal control and external expansion. Conform kings tightened control in the lowlands and reduced the hereditary privileges of Shan States. Conform officials, particularly after 1780, began commercial reforms that increased government income and rendered it more predictable. Money economy continued to gain ground. In 1857, the Crown inaugurated a full-fledged system of cash taxes and salaries, assisted by the country's first standardized silver coinage. Cultural integration continued. For the first time in history, the Burmese language and culture came to predominate the entire Irrawaddy Valley, with the Mon language and ethnicity completely eclipsed by 1830. The nearer Shan principalities adopted more lowland norms. The evolution and growth of Burmese literature and theatre continued, aided by an extremely high adult male literacy rate for the era. Monastic and lay elites around the Conform kings, particularly from Bodor-Pyay's reign, also launched a major reformation of Burmese intellectual life and monastic organization and practice known as the Sudama Reformation. It led to, amongst other things, Burma's first proper state histories.